thanks for checking. Hey, thanks for checking out an Eastern. Hey, and thanks for checking out another Eastern current fishing video. We're not on the water today, but I do have a pretty helpful tip that I think will help everybody. Hey guys, thanks for checking out another Eastern current fishing video. We're not on the water today, but I do have a pretty awesome tip that I think will be helpful for everyone that likes to target redfish and speckled trout in the winter around snot grass. So snot grass is very prevalent here in North Carolina and the surrounding states. It's a green, kind of snotty textured grass when you get it out of the water, but it mats the bottom. It covers the bottom, and it's about impossible to fish any type of jig on the bottom for redfish and trout this time of year because it will immediately get covered in snot grass. So I've stolen this method of fishing from the freshwater world. I've not invented this by any means, but it's called drop shotting, and it's used for a lot for smallmouth bass up in the Great Lakes, but really in pretty much any estuary now people are drop shotting. Or not estuary, but any lake or body of water for bass, people are drop shotting. It's just an effective way. It's a finesse style of fishing that allows you to really slowly and methodically pick apart an area. But that's not really why we're using it. We're using it because of the way that you're fishing. It's actually elevating your bait off the bottom, and your point of weight is not attached to your hook. So your weight is below where your hook is, which means when we're fishing for these redfish, we can still keep contact with the bottom and kind of work a bait back to us, but we're able to keep the bait elevated above. So this Z-Man soft plastic, this is a Senna jerk shad. This wants to float. This Elastec wants to float. So by itself, without a jig head, it's going to want to stay up in the water column. Now this hook, it's a 1/0 Aki hook. It's a hook I tie a lot of beefier flies on. It's a little bit of a heavy gauge hook, the wire is, but it's not too bad. And so it's very sharp. It's going to counter the float of this a little bit, but not like a jig head would. And what happens is when you cast that bait out and say, you know, here's my rod's over here, and the cast comes out, weight's on the bottom. As I work this bait here is going to bounce around. It's going to look more natural than that, obviously, when it's in the water, but you're able to hop this bait around and move it and keep this weight kind of hopping on the bottom. This weight will get covered in grass, but if you keep tension on the line when you pop it and let it fall, you're able to keep this bait just working and whatnot above the grass back to the boat. So you're able to fish an area and throw into these schooling redfish and not have to worry about, is that cast going to get grassed up before the fish see it. So if you let this fall to the bottom, if you don't keep that line tight enough, there's a really good chance that this could get grassed up. But if you keep that rod tip high and keep that bait, working, you don't even have to work it, but if you just keep tension on that line to where you can keep that bait sitting in one spot, you can throw it out there, let it sit and wait for a school of redfish to get to it before you start working it, and this will never touch the grass. This won't get grassed up. So even today, I had a guide trip today, and so many times we'd throw out in front of the school of redfish, let the bait sit. The one school in particular was in a lot of snot grass. They were been a little pressured, so we couldn't land the baits in them. We had to kind of lead them and bring the baits to them or let them get to the bait. And every single time we did that, almost every single time, we'd go to work the bait and the fish would spook because it'd be covered in grass already. So this drop shot rig is just a really, really great, effective way to be able to fish for these fish in snot grass, but not get your actual bait covered in grass. Now, suspending baits work well, like a mirror lure, but still, if you let that sit too long, it's going to fall down. I mean, we were only fishing a foot of water, 1.5 feet, 2 feet of water at the most, and that mirror lure is going to be in the grass immediately too. So the drop shot is really the best way that I have found to keep that bait out of the grass, but still be able to fish very, very effectively, if not more effectively, than your jig. Now, it's a very simple rig. I'll kind of break down how we tie it. Like I said, it starts with these bullet weights. This is a 1/4 ounce bullet weight. It's a teardrop shaped weight with an eye at the top of it. So I do a 3-turn uni straight to that. Then I've got, and that's on about a 3 or 4 foot piece of fluorocarbon leader. This is 20 pound. I'll usually fish 15 or 20 pound. Then I will tie a chicken rig loop about 8 to 10 inches above this. Now, if you're fishing, you can change that to wherever you want based off the depth and where you want this actual bait to ride. But typically for redfish, if you're drop shotting for redfish, they're near the bottom. So that 8 to 10 inches is about perfect. And you can easily, if you end up with too high with the chicken rig loop, you can easily cut a little bit off the bottom and slide this weight up. So the chicken rig loop that you tie into here, I'll link a video for this knot so y'all can go check that out as well. It's a hard knot for me to show. I don't really have a good setup for tying knots and showing you on camera, but I will link it. I'll find a good video on YouTube and link it so y'all can see how to do that. But that loop will push through this hook, and the hook just loops into there. You kind of go through and around, pull that tight. And then the big thing too is how this hook attaches, or how this bait attaches to the hook. I'm not rigging it like you would a generic jig head. So I'm actually just I'm going through, this is the jerk shad here, and I'm taking this hook and just going through about, a centimeter back from the front, just right through the side of the bait and then back out. So it's just barely hooked there, as you can see at the front, and that just gives this bait a ton of movement. So you're just going to get a lot of action. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll throw this rig out in front of a school, let that school swim to it, and when I'm in the middle of the school, I'll just start shaking my rod tip. You don't even have to jig it back to yourself. You can just shake that rod tip, and this bait's just sitting there in the school, just wiggling and darting back and forth. And I'm not actually even moving the bait back to me. I'm able to just get some incredible movement just by when I'm jigging it. I'm just putting a little bit of slack and then pulling it back out here. So it's kind of just going like this, and it gets eaten immediately as soon as these fish see this thing jumping around. It looks like a bait fish that got hit by redfish and stunned or jacked up a little bit, and is just kind of darting all over the place. And it's a really, really effective way. Again, I will link in how to do this knot, but it's a very simple rig. I mean, it's about 3 feet from top to bottom typically for me, with that hook being about 8 to 10 inches up from the weight. But what you need is a light wire J hook, or light to medium wire. This is a medium wire J hook as far as the gauge. It's pretty thick. But you can get away with light wire is the point that I'm trying to get to. But the thicker one, if you hook a 28, 30-inch redfish with 20-pound fluoro and this hook, you can pull on them. You're not going to worry about breaking them off or opening that hook up. But the hook and the weight and the leader, that's really all you need. And I tend to fish these scented jerk shads a lot when I'm fishing a drop shot for redfish. But any of the smaller profile fluke style baits are great. I really do like the Z-Man for drop shotting, just simply because it wants to float and it's just on a hook, so you just get better action. Now you can fish, a denser plastic that might sink, but I think fishing a plastic that wants to float is the way to go because you're going to get more action. I actually took this off, but this curly tail, we were fishing this curly tail that way today on the drop shot, and it was doing great. But just a really, really effective way to fish around that grass and not have to worry about always having grass on your hook. So I hope that kind of opened your eyes to a new style or a new way to go target these redfish in the winter, because for me, that's one of the most frustrating things guiding is when you work, you pull your butt off in the wind to get up and get that shot at the fish, and then you throw in there and you got grass on your jig and the fish don't eat it. It's just something that can be so easily combated this way here, but I really haven't found another way to go about it other than the drop shot. So I hope that's helpful, guys. I hope you're all able to get out on the water and catch some redfish using this. If you have already done that before, let me know in the comments. Let me know how you like to rig it, and if you go out there and you give it a shot, let me know how you do. Well, guys, thanks for checking out this video. A little reminder too is if you haven't checked out Eastern Current on any of the podcast platforms, we do a weekly podcast where I host a podcast. I'll bring on a different anglers, different guides. And then I have my buddy Cameron Pappas and my buddy Ozzy. They also host one each week. So every Tuesday on any of the podcast platforms, you can find the Eastern Current podcast. And every Thursday, you'll find on the same Eastern Current platform, you'll find Ozzy's podcast and Cameron's podcast. But thanks for checking out this video. And as always, hope y'all catch some fish, and we'll see you next week.